Okay, just imagine this for a second. You wake up, and in the span of just 53 years, that's basically one lifetime, almost the entire known world has been taken over by a single city. Just one. How on earth does something like that happen? Well, there was a guy, an ancient historian named Polybius, who was actually there to see it. And he spent his entire life trying to figure out that exact question. So today, we're going to crack open his timeless manual for power. So this is the question that just ate at Polybius. How did Rome, this one city-state, manage to conquer, as he put it, almost the whole inhabited world in less than a person's lifetime? Now, for him, this wasn't some act of God, it wasn't magic. No, it was a puzzle with a logical answer, and you better believe he was going to solve it. You see, Polybius wasn't just trying to tell a story about the past, he was trying to reverse engineer it. He was basically a detective, combing through the evidence, looking for the cause and effect chain that rocketed Rome to the top. His goal? To create a user's manual for power, a blueprint anyone could follow based on the most incredible success story the world had ever seen. So what was his first major discovery? Well, it was a pretty radical idea for his time. History isn't just a bunch of random stuff that happens. Polybius argued that great success and great failure isn't just about luck. It's the direct result of rational human action, of deliberate choices, and of really, really careful planning. And this is where Polybius really went against the grain. You gotta remember, most historians back then chalked everything up to the whims of the gods, or the blind spinning of fortune's wheel. You win, the gods love you. You lose, well, tough luck. But Polybius, he looked at the exact same events and saw something totally different, the clear, undeniable fingerprint of human intelligence. He was saying that success isn't some gift from the heavens, it's something you build with rational thought and foresight. And his poster child for this idea? The Roman general Publius Scipio. For Polybius, Scipio was the living, breathing proof of his theory, a leader who won time and time again, not because he was lucky or divinely favored, but because he just plain out thought everyone else. And when Polybius dug into Scipio's methods, he found a repeatable pattern, a blueprint for winning. Scipio always acted on, quote, calculation and foresight. I mean, get this, during battles, he'd literally create a human shield of his own men around him, not out of cowardice, but just so he could get a clear, calm view of the chaos and make the right call. For Polybius, the lesson here was huge. Scipio's victories might have looked like miracles, but they were actually the totally predictable result of a superior method. But, a brilliant strategy wasn't the whole story. Polybius realized that real lasting power depended on something way deeper, the moral fiber of the leaders themselves. He argued that the character of a ruler, whether they were driven by integrity or corruption, was one of the biggest factors in the fate of an entire nation. I mean, just think about the Roman ideal Polybius was looking at. When one general, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, conquered Macedonia, there was a treasury with 6,000 talents just sitting there, his for the taking. Polybius writes that he was so incorruptible he even refused to see it. And what about Scipio? After he took Carthage, the richest city in the known world, he took absolutely nothing for himself. For Polybius, this was the real foundation of an empire, leaders with integrity you just couldn't shake. And to really hammer this point home, Polybius shows us the polar opposite. He points to this guy, Nabis, the tyrant of Sparta, as the absolute antithesis of Roman virtue. If the Romans built their power on integrity, well, Nabis built his on a foundation of pure, unadulterated cruelty. I mean, just look at his crew. Polybius describes Nabis's inner circle as a who's who of the ancient underworld: murderers, housebreakers, footpads, and burglars. This wasn't a government, it was a criminal gang, a regime built entirely on fear and violence. And the symbol of his rule, wow, it's pure horror. Polybius describes this machine Nabis had built, a life-sized statue of his wife, Apega, all dressed up in expensive clothes. But here's the thing. Underneath the clothes, its arms and chest were lined with sharp iron spikes. So, if a citizen refused to give him money, Nabis would just say, perhaps my Apega can persuade you. And then this thing would embrace the victim, torturing them until they paid up or died. This wasn't just monstrous. For Polybius, it was the perfect symbol of a power that was completely rotten from the inside out. All right, so this leads us to Polybius's third crucial lesson. He noticed that lots of people could conquer, but very, very few actually knew how to govern. Winning the war, he warned, is often the easy part.
So the big question becomes, what do you do after you've won? This, for Polybius, was the real test of a leader or a nation. Do you rule with wisdom and fairness, or with tyranny and greed? Because the answer, he argued, determines whether your empire lasts for generations or if it just collapses on itself overnight.
He uses the Carthaginians in Spain as a perfect case study of what not to do. It's a simple four-step process to disaster. Step 1, they win a huge military victory. Great. But then, step 2, they immediately start ruling the locals with an iron fist. The result? Step 3, their subjects, who could have been allies, turn into bitter enemies. And finally, step 4, the whole empire falls apart. Their own cruelty turned their greatest strength into the very thing that destroyed them. So, okay, let's pull all these threads together. We've got foresight over fortune, character over corruption, and wisdom in victory. When you combine them, you get to the absolute core of Polybius's entire worldview. He called his method pragmatic history, and the idea was actually pretty simple, but it was revolutionary. He believed that if you looked closely enough, history wasn't just a random collection of stories. It was a science of cause and effect. By studying the choices people made and the character that drove them, you could create a toolkit for understanding why things happen and maybe, just maybe, even anticipate what's coming next. In a world that felt chaotic, a world that seemed to be governed by invisible forces and fate, Polybius's message was a game changer. We are the architects of our own destiny. The rise and fall of empires isn't written in the stars. It's the sum total of human decisions. And that, of course, leaves us with a pretty big question. Polybius looked back at the past to explain the world he was living in. So if we take his lens, his method, and apply it to our own time, we have to ask ourselves, what choices are being made right now? By whom? And what kind of story, what kind of future are they building for all of us?